Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Get Started Fast with Avid for Final Cut Pro 7 Editors tutorial series. My name is Kevin P. McAuliffe, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at two important tools at your disposal that will not only save you in a jam, but also help you clean up your projects. And I'm talking about the Avid Attic and the Media Tool. Now, by looking at these two tools, you're going to get a better understanding not only of how Media Composer 7 is structured when it comes to projects, bins, and media, but also of the organization that's happening outside of the Media Composer 7 editing application. Okay, short introduction here. Let's just get into Final Cut Pro 7 and let's get started. Okay, so let's Command and Tab into Final Cut Pro 7. Now we have a perfectly new project. And what I'm going to do here, just for kicks, is I'm just going to add a bunch of new sequences. And let's just add some new bins as well. We'll just come up here and let's just create some new bins. We'll just say new bin. And I'll just use the shortcut here, Command and B, to create some new bins. And let's just import some footage. It's all obviously completely random here. Let's just come back to, I don't have a shortcut there. We'll just come to the actual Mac drive right here. We'll come to previous, we'll come to footage, we'll come to, sure, why not boxing. Let's grab all these clips from Digital Juices Video Tracks HD. Just stick some in these bins here. Doesn't really matter, we're just being random. And I think I'm just going to take one of these sequences here and we'll just make a quick timeline by just dropping these clips in here. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is because the first thing I want to talk about is simply saving a project. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Kev, you were talking about sort of working and organizing outside of your editing application. So how is this going to come into play? Well, let me show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this project and I'm simply going to save it to the desktop. I'm going to call this FCP7 project. And I'm going to say save. Now here's the situation that you're in. You've got this fantastic FCP project right here. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to say get info. Now this project right now is only 66 kilobytes big. But believe it or not, I've actually seen projects that get to be hundreds of megabytes big. We're talking 200, 300, 400 megabytes big. Why? Because someone's working on something huge. It could be, a 2-hour-long documentary. It could be a feature film. Who knows what it could be? They've got hundreds of sequences with thousands of clips, tons of layers in these timelines. And what happens? They save their project out. And then what happens? The project corrupts itself. And then what happens? You essentially lose everything that you were working on inside of your Final Cut Pro 7 project. Well, the great thing about Media Composer 7 to be more specific, is that it doesn't organize things in one giant lump sum. Let me show you what I mean. Let's Command Tab into Media Composer 7. Now, as you can see, I'm on the Select Project window, and in this case, right now I have a private project, meaning that this project is only viewable by whoever's logged into the system. So the first thing I'm going to do is mimic exactly what we did inside of Final Cut Pro 7, and we're going to create an external project. First thing we need to do is tell Media Composer, where is this external project going to be? So let's come onto our Mac drive, and let's just create a new folder, and we're just going to call it, appropriately enough, Avid Projects. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to say open, and now we need to actually create a new project. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is simply click on the new project button, and let's call this new project MC7 for FCP7 users. And what I'm going to do is just switch the project over here. Let's switch it over to 720p 23976. I'm simply going to say OK, and I'm going to say OK. And we're now ready to work in this new project. Let's just create, let's create 4 bins. We'll stick with my standard bin layout here, of course, of audio and clips, and of course graphics, and last but certainly not least, sequences. And let's just import some clips. I'm simply going to AMA link to, sure, let's import the boxing clips, or AMA link to the boxing clips here. Of course, in a matter of seconds, we now have access to all of those clips, and I'm just going to take these clips. I'll just take some of them and stick them in graphics. We'll just pretend that they're graphics. For right now, I'll take a few of them and stick them into audio. And what we want to do with these last 3 is make a sequence out of them. So I'm going to call the first one up into the preview window. We'll just drop it into a new timeline, of course, inside of the sequences bin. And we're not going to do anything fancy. I'm just going to take the clips, just drop them in the entire duration of the clip. There we go. And now I want to save all of these bins. Now, the easiest way to do that, since I want to save and close them all, is to simply select one of them, navigate up to Windows, come down to Close All Bins, and there they all go. So they're all now closed and saved. Now let's just hide Media Composer here for a second. And what I want to do now is I want to come down to the Mac drive, and you'll see, of course, on the Mac drive, we have that Avid Projects folder that we created. I'm simply going to double click on it. There is our MC7 for Final Cut Pro 7 users project. And what's very cool about the way that Media Composer 7 organizes things, if I double click on it, you'll see that we now have access to the individual bins as opposed to them being all grouped together in one project like in Final Cut. Well, what does that mean for you, the user? Well, what it means for you is that if you get a call from a producer who's out of their mind, I really need a copy of this sequences, bin, I'm having problems with the internet, the file needs to be really small, can you send it to me right away? You know what? This file, chances are, even if you have a huge sequence with tons of edits in it, tons of clips, tons of video and audio tracks, chances are we're talking about double-digit megabytes. In this case, we could be dealing with a Final Cut project that's, hundreds of megabytes. Then it's a matter of taking this, adjusting that, moving this into a new project, saving this, doing this. Guess what? I can simply come right in here. I can simply take this, option drag it right to the desktop here. Once it's on the desktop, I can simply take this and either send it the way it is or zip it and send it, and the client will have it literally in a matter of minutes. Now let's talk about something else here. Now we all know that there's cases where, things go awry in a project, you've realized that, maybe you've done something that you didn't want to do and you need to go back a bunch of versions to fix something with a previous version of the sequence. Or, as we all know coming from Final Cut Pro 7, one problem that Final Cut Pro 7 had all the time was corrupting projects. Now, to be perfectly honest, I've been editing in Media Composer for about 17 or 18 years now, and to be perfectly honest, I have never ever had a problem with a corrupt bin. But you know what? Maybe something happens. Maybe something happens to one of your bins. Maybe somebody deletes it by accident or even on purpose. The question now is how do you go back and get something that you've saved and you want to restore it? Well, the first thing that you'll remember coming from Final Cut Pro 7 is that inside of Final Cut Pro 7, if you came up here to the user preferences, right down here at the bottom is where you would set up your autosave vault. You'll see right now in the autosave vault, we're going to save a copy every 5 minutes from a maximum of 10 copies per project to a maximum of 5 projects. Now the location of where it's going is determined actually inside of the system settings. You'd think that they'd sort of set them in the same place, but they don't. It's actually located right here, Autosave Vault, and you could actually set that to be anywhere that you want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cancel out of that. I'm just going to hide Final Cut. Because inside of Media Composer 7, there's something that we need to set up first before we even talk about the Autosave Vault. So what I'm going to do is simply Command and Tab into Media Composer 7. What we're going to do is head on over to our settings, and we're going to come down to our bin settings. Inside of our bin settings, you'll see that we have the autosave interval right now set to 15 minutes. In most cases, I set that to be something like 5. Right now, the inactivity period is set for 15, and the autosave, the forced autosave, is set to 17 minutes. But what we want to focus on right now is the project's attic. Now, the attic is pretty much the same as the autosave vault. The attic is obviously the Media Composer's version of it. You'll see right now the maximum files in a project's attic is 1,000 files. That's absolutely staggering. That's a lot of files. Up to 50 versions of the file in the attic. Now, of course, that does beg the question, where exactly is the attic located? What I'm going to do is simply say OK, and I'm just going to hide Media Composer 7. Now, we're on the Mac right now, but don't worry, you're going to see at the bottom of the screen where the Windows equivalent of the attic is hidden right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the Macintosh hard drive. I'm going to come to Users, and most people would think that I would come to the Home User, which in this case is me, but I'm actually not going to do that. Why? Well, because then the home user is based on whoever is logged into the system. Now remember, that was a big drawback inside of Final Cut Pro 7. Users were based on whoever was logged into the system, and it doesn't work like that inside of Media Composer 7. We can set as many different users as we want inside the application. That being said, all the different users are going to want to have access to the attic from an individual login or from a shared login. Now inside the shared login, what we're going to do is head into the Avid Media Composer folder, and you're actually going to see the attic right here. If I double click on it, you'll see here are all the projects that are on my system right now. Now some of them I've hidden just for the purposes of this tutorial, but the one that we want to look at the most is MC7 for FCP7 users. If I simply double click on that, you're going to see that there's a folder called bins. If I double click on that, there are the different bins that have autosaves for them. You'll see that they were actually set, in this case they were set a little bit longer than every 5 minutes because we just got in and changed that. But take a look, I haven't had this project created very long, and we already have all of these autosaves already going on. So if I needed to go back a few versions, I can easily just take this bin, drag it somewhere like the desktop, simply open it in Media Composer, and I can actually start working with a previous version literally instantaneously. Okay, so let's Command and Tab back into Final Cut Pro 7 because the last thing that I do want to talk about is media management. Now, that was actually always a huge complaint about Final Cut Pro in general, was that the media management tool wasn't really that strong. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to navigate up to File, and I'm simply going to come down to Media Manager. Now, you're going to see that I'm going to be told that the following items do not contain the media required by Media Manager Sequence 2, which is perfectly fine. All I'm going to do is simply say Continue. And you'll see in here that what we basically have is we have this I'd say a fairly straightforward little tool that's going to let you get in and do the basics, such as to copy media, to move it, to recompress it, to use the existing media, or to create an offline for the purposes of going from a offline, let's say a low res at NTSC 23976 up to 1080 23976. Now, to be honest, I could get in and explain what each one of these items does, but you know what? It's really a way of the past. What I want to do is I want to focus on the future, your future inside of Media Composer 7, and I want to show you how to do a couple common tasks that I know you're going to want to do when you're working on your projects. So let's Command and Tab back into Media Composer 7. Now, before we move on, I do want to remind you that we have talked about the similarities and differences between importing in Final Cut Pro 7 and AMA linking to inside of Media Composer. Now, from this point forward in this tutorial, we're not going to be referring to AMA linking to. I'm going to be referring to actually capturing / importing media. So what's actually happening is that those clips are actually being converted into MXF files, which is the native format that you'll be working with inside of Media Composer 7. Okay, so I've brought in some clips here into the clips bin, and they're just standard clips, the boxing clips from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD. And what's actually happening with these clips is that when they are imported or captured, if I hide out a Media Composer, on the drive that I captured to, which in this case is the Mac drive, a new folder is going to be created the instant I either import or capture, and it's going to be called, appropriately enough, Avid Media Files. Inside of Avid Media Files will be a folder called MXF, a folder called number 1 in this case, and you'll see here are all the converted QuickTime to MXF files called, appropriately enough, exactly what they were when they were imported. You'll see it's called 374 Video Tracks HD. So this clip here actually refers to 374 of Video Tracks HD right here. There we go. And to prove it, what I can also do is simply select that clip. I can navigate up to File, and I can simply come down to Reveal File, just like that, and take a look. There's that clip inside of my Avid Media Files folder. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Kev, how does this tie in with the Media Manager? Well, let me show you. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to navigate up to the Tools dropdown, because what we're going to be talking about now is the Media tool. You'll see it right here. So remember, inside of Final Cut Pro 7, I'll just Command Tab back to Final Cut Pro 7, we're talking about the Media Manager. Inside of Media Composer 7, we're talking about the Media tool. Now what I'm going to do is simply launch the Media tool. You'll see I'm now brought to the Media tool display, and what's very cool about the Media tool is that it's very simple, very straightforward to see exactly what you have going on with your media inside of your projects, plural, not just the project you're currently working on. So you'll see right now on the left, I can get in and choose what drives I want Media Composer to take a look at in regards to the media. In this case, I only have my media going to one place, to the Mac drive. Now I can actually say, okay, show me all of the different media that's associated with any 1, 2, 3, 4, or all of the different projects that I happen to have on my system. So in this case, I'm just going to stick with the current project. Now, for some reason you had something else selected and you said, okay, where's the current project? I've got hundreds of them on here. No problem. I can simply say, only show me the current project. Now down here at the bottom, this is where people get a little bit thrown. We have 3 options: master clips, pre-compute clips, and media files. Well, let's talk about media files first. They're the most obvious. They're the actual media clips that we just took a look at inside of the Avid Media Files folder on my Mac drive. Next up, we have something called pre-compute clips. What is a pre-compute clip? Well, a pre-compute clip is any render or graphic, such as a title, that you might import or create in the course of editing your project. So let's say you're working on something, I realize that I have 6 layers of titles here. I'm going to render these titles just so that I can make sure that I get real-time playback. As soon as you click render, that's what a pre-compute clip is going to be. Also, if you happen to be in the title tool, you're working on a title, you say save. It says, do you want to save this title out? As soon as you say yes, that title has now become a pre-compute clip. Now, last but certainly not least, what is a master clip? Well, you can see by the icon, a master clip actually represents the actual clip in my bin, not the media file associated with it, just the clip that's linking it to that media file. So all I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say, show me everything that's associated with this project. Now you're going to see that what is going to happen is that the media tool is going to open and it's going to look to be populated with a lot of things. Well, a lot of things that we're not actually going to be worried about right now. Well, why is that? Well, right now we're only dealing with the actual imported clips inside of this clips bin. Now, how do I know which clips those are? Well, take a look. I can see the individual media files, again, those clips that I saw in the actual Mac drive, and I can see that they're .mxf files. Those represent actual media files. You'll see that the master clips that I have on here are all the clips that look like this right here, just like the master clips that are in my bin. And then we have these clips here that represent the AMA link to media. Now what's important about these AMA link to clips is that I cannot select them and delete them. Why? Because remember, technically they're not taking up any space on the system. The media tool is only showing you them as a reference. But anything else that's in here that's an actual master clip and associated media file, I can select and hit the delete key on the keyboard, and you'll see right now I'm going to delete 10 video clips. I could say OK, and those would be gone from my system. Now what I'm going to do is simply say cancel. Now of course in this case I don't happen to have any pre-computes in here because I don't have anything rendered, I don't have any titles created, but if I did, of course if I navigate back up to tools, come down to media tool, you would see icons that look like this right here to tell you that those are pre-compute clips. Now I want to show you something that's very common that a lot of people run into. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close the media tool, and here's the situation. I'm going to take 3 clips. I'm going to take this clip. We'll just mark it in an out point, drop it into a new timeline. I'll take this clip here, sure, why not? Mark it in an out point here. And last but certainly not least, let's just take this bottom one here, sure, why not? Mark an in point, mark an out point, hit B on the keyboard to drop it in. Okay, so I have 3 clips in my timeline. Now we're just going to assume for argument's sake, this is 300 clips, and I have thousands of clips inside this project. But you know what, I'm done my project, and I really want to clean this up. I want to delete all that media that I'm not using, not the media I am using, just everything else. So how do we go about doing that? Well, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to call this Kev sequence. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come to the media tool. Let's go back to tools. Let's go down to media tool. Let's come in here into the current project. We're just going to select the Mac drive because I know that I only have media on the Mac drive. I'm going to leave everything here selected, and I'm simply going to say OK. There's everything that's on my system right now. Now what's important to keep in mind is that really deleting the AMA link to clips really doesn't matter because they're not taking up any hard drive space. They're not anything we imported or captured. They're just references to media that's currently on my drive. Now what I could do if I wanted to is I could leave the media tool open all the time and just minimize it like that. So what we're going to do first is before we get in and worry about the media tool, what I want to do is I want to see exactly what clips I've used in my sequence. And how do I do that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to select my sequence, then I'm going to head right back to the top toolbar. We're going to head right past clips to the left to our bin drop down, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Media Composer 7 to show me the media relatives. What this is basically doing is because I had the sequence selected, it's showing me all the clips that are relative or relatives to this sequence. Now you're thinking, well, Kev, you're just showing me the 3 clips that are in this bin. But what's important to keep in mind is that you'll remember that I had the media tool open right down here, and what it's also done is it's shown me in here which clips are the relatives to this sequence here. Well, then that would go to reason that if I was to navigate back up to bin and I was to actually reverse that selection, it's going to show me everything that is not a relative of that sequence. So now if I simply hit delete on the keyboard, and I deleted 7 video files, and I said OK, and I said delete, nothing that's in my timeline is going to go offline, but all of these other clips that are in my bin that aren't being used are now going to be gone, freeing up tons of space on my hard drive. Okay, so I hope that our in-depth look at the Attic and the Media Tool has really given you a better sense of what is going on under the hood of Media Composer, because it's like I always tell my students, the best editors out there not only know the editing application backwards and forwards, but they understand what's going on behind the scenes as well. So if you want to get post-production workflow tutorials and industry insight you need to bring great stories to life, head on over and check us out at avidblogs.com/post.